Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South, your weekly guide to everything that's happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia and Oceania. On the show this week, Mexico decides to elect all its judges. We tell you how and why. What is it with China and viruses? A new deadly virus is detected in China and the infamous Wuhan lab is back in the news for the wrong reasons. Remote working, flexible working and work from home are all passé. 4-day week is the in thing. And a primer on Sri Lanka's presidential election. All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. On 11 September, Mexico approved a sweeping judicial reform. It allowed election of judges at all levels from the lower courts right up to the top court of the land. In one fell swoop, outgoing President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, helped in no small measure by his protege and President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum, quite literally upended the country's judicial system. Now, it was all done constitutionally. First, the lower chamber of the legislature voted 359 to 135 to pass the legislation. Next, the upper chamber of the legislature okayed it by 86 to 41 votes. Then, the states of Mexico signed on to it. The ruling party is in a good position in 25 of the 32 states. So, ratification by a majority of the state legislatures was not a problem. President Obrador says that he could sign and publish the constitutional change as early as 15 September on the eve of the country's Independence Day. And once that happens, Mexico can begin electing its judges. So far, so good, but it raises more questions than it answers. For instance, will it politicize the judiciary? Will it undermine the rule of law? Could interest groups such as corporates or mafia influence judges' election? What happens to the separation of powers as we understand it? What about the independence of the judiciary? Will the judiciary still be able to overrule the government? And will judges come under pressure to vote for what is popular? Now, as things stand now, it's a done deal, and it is a big deal. Get this, no other country in the world has done something like this ever in human history. Mexico will soon begin electing its judges as opposed to appointing or selecting them, which is what you and I have grown up knowing. Now, what do the reforms say? Well, for starters, all the nearly 7,000 posts of judges in Mexico will be filled through a nationwide election, just like countries around the world elect their president, prime minister, or lawmakers. 2, the number of judges in the top court will decrease from 11 to 9. 3, the term of judges will be shortened to 12 years. 4, the minimum age for becoming a judge will be 35. 5, the minimum work experience required to become a judge will be halved from 10 to 5 years. And 6, a new committee will look into matters of indiscipline or unethical conduct of judges. There are other changes too. Judges stand to lose certain benefits in terms of pay and allowances, and judges will now be able to work anonymously on cases pertaining to criminal gangs. So how will this new system work? Well, the government, legislature and judiciary can nominate candidates who will then be vetted by a committee to determine whether they can stand for election or not. It's a departure from the existing system under which Mexico's president forwards a short list of names for the post of a judge of the top court to the upper chamber of the legislature for approval. Now, there are compelling arguments to be made for and against election of judges. The Mexican government believes that it will reduce, if not end, corruption altogether. It will address the problem of nepotism. It will become easier to punish errant judges and generally make the judiciary answerable to the people, not big business or organized crime syndicates. But critics fear that courts will now be stacked with judges who favor a particular party. Anyone with a law degree could now stand for election as a judge. It would become easier for politicians and mafiosi to influence judges. Checks and balances on the government will go. And last but not the least, there won't be security of tenure because many judges could soon be out of a job overnight. As Sandra Herrera Benitez, a spokesperson for judicial workers, says, where does that leave my 27 years of service? So, is it radical? Yes, absolutely. Is it unprecedented? Well, yes and no. In Bolivia, only the judges of the top court are elected. In the US, some states elect judges. Switzerland elects its judges, but only at the local level. And in Japan, the judges of the top court are reviewed through a vote every decade, that is, every 10 years. So Mexico is not the first country to pursue similar judicial reforms. Israel has tried to rein in the judiciary too. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government wants to control appointment of judges, prevent the country's top court from overturning laws, and empower the country's legislature to veto the courts. Protests broke out in 2023 against the move, but the Hamas attacks in Israel have put the reforms on the back burner. Opinion is divided in Mexico. Mexico's Chief Justice Norma Lucia Pina Hernandez is opposed to the reforms. She says the dismantling of the judiciary is not the way forward. Luis Hernandez, a 21-year-old student, says there is no point in having a judicial career if in the end you have to be popular to deliver justice. Mexico's major trading partners, the US and Canada, have all warned that the judicial overhaul could undermine a trade pact and negatively impact investment. The reform has spooked markets too, with Mexico's currency weakening some 17%. But President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum says a truly independent and autonomous SPA elected by the people is good for the country. And for his part, outgoing President Obrador says it sets an example for the world. The jury is still out on that. There are some who say that if you have not done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. Others say if judges become politicians, will they start thinking like one? Also, don't forget, elections require money. So who will fund the election of judges? For now, Mexico and the world can only wait and watch how things pan out for this path-breaking initiative. As they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The coronavirus is still lurking around. So are many other viruses such as Mpox. Now, on top of that comes the news of the discovery of a new deadly virus in China that affects the brain. But that's not all. An ongoing dispute over China's opaque policies and practices refuses to die down as the infamous Wuhan lab finds itself at the center of another controversy. Jayant Das has more.
Even as countries struggle to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, comes the news of another potentially dangerous virus called wetland. It's been detected in China, the same country that first reported cases of the coronavirus in December 2019. The wetland virus is transmitted through ticks. The New England Journal of Medicine reported that 17 Chinese patients contracted the virus. The virus can have a potentially damaging effect on the brain. It can cause hemorrhagic fever and ultimately lead to death. The first recorded case of the wetland virus was reported in 2019, around the same time as the coronavirus. A 61-year-old man who was bitten by ticks contracted the virus in the Inner Mongolia region of China. The symptoms of the virus include fever, headache, dizziness, muscle pain, fatigue, back pain, arthritis, swollen lymph nodes, and neurological issues. While these seem fairly mild symptoms, some cases may be far worse. A patient who contracted the virus is reported to have fallen into a coma because of high white blood cell count in the brain and the spinal fluid. Even as the world debates whether the coronavirus was leaked, accidentally or otherwise, from a laboratory in Wuhan, a recent study has cast a fresh doubt over the same laboratory. A paper published by the Paris-based Pasteur Institute suggests that the polio strain that infected a 4-year-old Chinese boy in China in 2014 is 99% identical to a polio variant that was stored more than 300 kilometers away at the infamous Wuhan Institute of Virology. While the study cannot confirm the origin of the polio virus, it says that the possible leak of the polio strain from the laboratory must be explored. Polio has also been reported recently from Gaza and Nepal. Similar virus outbreaks have been reported elsewhere. Mpox has struck Africa, Sweden, Pakistan, and the Philippines. A new COVID-19 subvariant called XEC is affecting Europe. All of which makes one wonder, are virus-borne diseases making a comeback? Is the world looking at another pandemic? And can pandemics be predicted? Professor Yonatan Grad of Harvard University does not rule out the possibility. A paper published by Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health cites experts as saying that another pandemic is inevitable. While it's difficult to predict pandemics, efforts are on to work on an AI model that can hopefully warn ahead of time in the event of the next outbreak. US researchers are developing an AI-based early warning system that will examine social media posts to help predict future pandemics. The model works on scanning tweets on X and training the algorithm to help to detect early signs of a future pandemic. While publishing a global framework earlier this September to help member states comprehensively investigate the origins of new and re-emerging pathogens, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus urged China to share all information it has on the origins of COVID-19. Is Beijing listening? Jayan Das's report for DD India.
Now, are you anxious that your office is always tracking the number of hours you work? I am. There, I said it. No, seriously, do you sometimes feel like you are married to your job? Do you feel the need to work long hours just to prove your worth? And do you believe that 40 to 50 hours per week are one too many? If your answer is a resounding yes, then stick with me. I have news for you. A 4-day work week is becoming popular. In the global south, the UAE has done it, and so have some other countries. A 4-day working week followed by a long weekend might be a dream come true for many, for various reasons. Work-life balance, mental health, physical well-being. But it has its fair share of critics. Some companies are not okay with it, and some governments remain skeptical. But believe me, the future is here. There's no denying that the concept of a 4-day working week is gaining traction globally. Harvard Business Review suggests that a 4-day work week allows more personal time. It helps to reduce stress. In 2020, 62% said they had experienced burnout often or extremely often in the previous 3 months. That number rose to 67% in 2021 when people said that stress and burnout had increased since the COVID-19 pandemic. The practice of working from home during lockdown brought with it a new culture. And before long, the popularity of a 4-day working week had caught on. Harvard Business Review also says a 4-day work week increases productivity because there is less burnout or job fatigue. Countries and companies alike are opting for a 4-day working week in order to 1. Attract potential employees, 2. Retain existing staff, and 3. Create a positive environment for employees in an already competitive job market. Now, the UAE is the first country in the global south to adopt this practice. It introduced a 4.5-day work week in January 2022. The Emirate of Sharjah in the UAE introduced a 4-day working week the same year. The national newspaper published from the UAE reported that Dubai is doing a pilot project on a 4-day work week with shorter daily hours for government staff. It has decreased the working day to 7 hours for 15 government organizations between 12th August and the 30th of September. It's becoming popular in South America too. In April 2024, a new law came into effect in Chile. The labor code was amended to reduce the weekly working hours to 40 while maintaining full pay and no drop in productivity. It will enter into force gradually over 5 years. The government of Chile has promised incentives to companies that voluntarily make the switch in the interim. While we are talking about South America, Brazil is the first Latin American country to try out a 4-day week. The feedback was good, so much so that 46% of companies decided to permanently implement the model. The biggest trial of a 4-day working week took place in the UK in 2022. Most of the 61 companies that took part in it pledged to continue with the policy. A third of them said they had switched to the new model permanently, and what's more, none of the 3,000 participants wanted to return to a 5-day week. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has sought proposals for what he calls the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and hailing the pilot experiment as quote-unquote extremely successful. Similarly, Singapore introduced new guidelines in April 2024 allowing workers to request for a 4-day week and work from home. The country also plans to allow flexible work locations by the year end. Germany's largest workers' union is looking into a 4-day week as a response to Volkswagen's move to close factories and end job guarantees. With these big changes on the table, the union is exploring a new model to support workers. Japan has become the latest country to consider a 4-day week. The country is notorious for karoshi. It means death from overwork in the Japanese language. At least 54 such deaths are reported every year, including from heart attacks. Now, this in a country where saying no to work is frowned upon. But it's not all hunky-dory. The result of a pilot project in Costa Rica was not a complete success. South Africa conducted a trial in March 2024. The results were positive, but policymakers there are still to decide whether to go ahead with it or not. Now, you'd be surprised to learn that amid all the debate about a 4-day week, some countries have swung to the other extreme. For instance, in Egypt, where work-life balance and mental health are a taboo, instead of reducing the working hours, the government there plans to increase them. It's being described as part of an effort to redesign the work environment in line with global changes and improve the quality of government performance. Wait, there's more. Greece has opted for a, take a guess, 6-day week. The Greek government is implementing a new 6-day work schedule which falls under its employment law to kickstart the country's economy that is still emerging from the wreckage of Europe's worst financial crisis in decades. In India, Infosys founder and billionaire N.R. Narayana Murthy urges young people to work for 70 hours a week. He argues that India's work productivity is one of the lowest in the world. The International Labour Organization says India allows 46.7 hours of average per week per employed person. And then there is the Australian mining tycoon Chris Ellison, who says his employees must not step out of the building even for a coffee break during office hours. So even as we debate the merits of a 4-day week, let me just say this to all you tired, exhausted souls out there. Hang in there. Help might be coming your way faster than you think. All right, so that was all about the quest for a work-life balance. And now to our weekly poll where you, the viewer, get to have your say. We're asking you, 4-day week is a good idea and I welcome it. Yes or no? What do you think? I repeat, 4-day week is a good idea and I welcome it. Yes or no? Tell us what you think. You can post your replies on our social media accounts on Facebook, X and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. And now to the result of last week's poll. We'd asked you, do you prefer living in a capital city in spite of its problems? Yes or no? And you have spoken. 68% say yes, we prefer living in a capital city in spite of all its problems. 32% say no. Thank you for letting us know what you think. We appreciate it. Sri Lanka will go to the polls next week. The presidential election will determine the future of the South Asian island nation, which is struggling to recover from its economic collapse in 2022. Ragini Sudhir Chore breaks it down for you.
Sri Lanka will hold a presidential election on 21st September. It will be the first such election after the island nation's economy collapsed in 2022. 17.1 million people are eligible to vote for the country's 10th presidential election, including 1 million first-time voters. A record 38 candidates are in the fray. 35 candidates had contested the last presidential election in 2019. No woman is contesting, although 56% of the eligible voters are women. Opinion polls do not project a clear winner. The election is seen as a referendum on the incumbent Ranil Wickremesinghe's 2-year rule that has overseen a fragile recovery of the economy. Wickremesinghe, a former leader of the United National Party, is running as an independent. He took office in July 2022 after lawmakers elected him to serve out the rest of the 5-year term of Gotabaya Rajapakse, who was elected in November 2019 but fled during the 2022 economic crisis. Wickremesinghe faces a tough challenge from Sajith Premadasa. Premadasa is the leader of the opposition and heads the Samagi Janabala Vigaya. He is the son of the late president Rana Singhe Premadasa, who was assassinated by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Ilam terrorists in 1992. Then there is Anura Kumara Dasanaike from the National People's Power, a coalition led by the Janata Vimukti Peramuna. The JVP is a Marxist-Leninist communist party. Also standing for the election is Namal Rajapakse, the son of former President Mahinda Rajapakse and the nephew of another former President, Gotabaya Rajapakse. Although the Rajapakses have lost much of their popularity after the economic downturn, they remain influential in Sri Lankan politics. Wickremesinghe's campaign manifesto is called 5 Triumphant Years of Sri Lanka with Ranil. His economic policy has been closely aligned with the International Monetary Fund-led recovery program. Premadasa's manifesto is titled A Win for All. In it, he promises to negotiate with the existing IMF deal for terms that are more favorable for the more economically vulnerable sections of society. Dasanaike's manifesto, titled A Rich Country, A Beautiful Life, has a left populist tone, including promises of cutting taxes and increasing government employee salaries. With a multi-ethnic and multi-religious population of 22 million, Sri Lanka is a country strategically located in South Asia at the crossroads of major shipping routes in the Indo-Pacific region.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Voice of the Global South. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.